Something that's not talked about enough in the industry is
you get burned out.
You're a pretty screwed up individual that is unbelievably buttoned up and put together.
That was something that happened to me.
We are all human beings.
I actually have a chance now to understand how to be a better parent.
You don't have to talk to a person to get your whole job site off the ground and going.
My daughter, she can sniff out the AI instantly.
They're not your customer.
I told Anna, I was like, we're going to see real quick who runs a good restaurant.
Doesn't matter if it's golf or cooking, you will get results when you love what you do.
This is live on the Clubhouse.
All right, let's roll on into the show here. So talking about this theme of time management, it was a big fight with me when I was a territory rep that they wanted you to plan your calendar. Your bosses want to be able to look in your calendar and see your plan and, I guess make themselves feel better that you're out working that day. I was not a planner, and I'll tell you why in the heavy equipment space specialty in particular, really was just overwhelmingly chaotic to the point to where even when you go through the process of planning your day, only a select few days actually made it through the planning process to actually, be executed. So, one example I will give of that is gone through the effort of planning an entire week. It was a Tuesday. I remember that for some odd reason. And it was probably about this time of year, and it might've been right after Memorial Day because it may be a Monday off, but I had this great week planned and I was going to be in Tuscaloosa, really working on the bypass market out there, trying to chase those customers. I had a day set up. I don't remember if I had meetings. I think I did have a lunch meeting, but pretty much cold calling in the morning, following up on some projects in the afternoon. And I get to the Western bypass there in Tuscaloosa coming from Birmingham, and I pull over because I'd taken a phone call on the way and needed to pull over and send a quote. So I pull into a gas station there. And when I say that my day blew up to the point to where by the time I got done sending that quote, I'd taken a call and needed to do another quote and missed some calls. And in the process throughout that morning of returning calls, putting in quotes, booking deals, moving fleet, I did not leave that gas station until it was time to go to my lunch meeting. Even then, it was a relatively rushed affair of the customer I'd been, courting for a while. And I was antsy because I'm missing so many phone calls, even while we're in this meeting. And I knew I had some more quotes to get in. I needed to follow up on some deals that were going out. So, rush through that meeting, get back in my car, not far from where that gas station was, figured to say, let me just go back over there and, see if I can't get caught up, because eventually I'm going to need to start working my way back to Birmingham, pick kids up and things of that nature. Actually, that might've been before kids. In fact, I think that was probably before kids. But anyway, wifely obligations, family obligations. I needed to get back or begin the trek back to Birmingham anyway. So, get back after lunch, probably, 1:30, something like that at this gas station and start going through voicemails, pulling quotes, sending quotes. And it was really probably close to 4:00. Cause I remember I got behind a school bus when I was leaving. I didn't know really what time it was. And look, I said, man, could it be after school already? And sure enough, I'd basically spent my whole work day there. I had a great plan to be all over Tuscaloosa, meet with all these different customers, and, ended up spending the day at the gas station instead. Now, it was also one of my most productive days. So, that's a very long-winded story as a way of saying, I used that for years as saying that's why I don't plan my days, because I've never gotten to fully execute. But I think what I missed in those times were the thought that goes in while you're doing the planning. I would be going through getting my plan ready and see a couple of accounts in Tuscaloosa and be like, you know what, I forgot about this guy. I'm glad I looked. I'll go see him. So I think ultimately what it led me to believe of the heavy equipment industry and my personal personality as well is that, as long as I had the rough idea of a plan, then I didn't feel bad. I wouldn't get all worked up if I couldn't execute the plan the way I had it laid out on a particular day. because the way I ultimately did it, I would say, okay, you know, I'm going to be in this quadrant of my territory, you know, Mondays, Tuesdays, this, you know, so you got 4 quadrants. That's 4 days of the week. And then you always leave either Monday or Friday as a catch up, follow up, this kind of thing. And that doesn't mean you have to see every customer in this quadrant. That just means on this particular day, I intend to be on this particular geography of my territory. And, you know, for a younger rep, just having that bit of direction in the mornings to wake up to is so much better than waking up. I lost a very talented young rep after very little time in the field because he did not like the feeling of not having a structure, you know, not having a plan, not knowing where he, you know, was going. And it wasn't, you know, I had given him the quadrant plan. You know, what it was is that he just didn't have a customer base in this geography enough yet. And you know, the feeling of saying, okay, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to be doing this, but I don't know who I'm going to go see. I haven't found them yet. I think that kind of scared him a little bit. And, you know, ultimately that's a frightening prospect. You know, when you're living on a very low base salary, you have to build a new territory. You're coming into nothing and you say, okay, I've got this guarantee for, you know, 3 months, 6 months, a year. But after that, it's kill what you eat what you kill. If I haven't gotten it going by then I'm going to be in a pretty bad way. So that is a frightening prospect looking in. I think after some time in the industry and time in a territory and time, you know, experience, basically, you're not as scared of those things anymore because you've learned how to prospect. You know how to find the customer when there isn't a list, or you know how to make the list better because, you know, anybody can go, you know, buy a list or download a list of contractors in a geography. But, you know, I'll tell you this from painful experience, 90% of the time, the addresses aren't right. If you think a phone number is going to get you to anybody, you're wrong. You know, you've got to really start with these breadcrumbs and just kind of follow up the trail until you find these people. Generally, it's going to be on a job site. But then once you do, you can build some of the best relationships you'll ever build. You're just not going to find these folks in an office. And that's the way the heavy equipment works. That's why I was attracted to it. And ultimately, I think that's why I was successful in it, because I like that chaos. I need a certain amount of that chaos to keep my daily, you know, interest peaked, I guess is a good way to point it. Okay. So, you know, still we're talking about that, and the way we're going to tie all this back into time management for the sales rep is, you know, that money affects, or that productivity affects your money. You know, that to me was the single best part of being a commission rep is, you know, there's no busy work, side work, nothing that you're not going to get paid on if you do it right. If you go out and you know, you might spend 100 hours of your life prospecting this person, taking them out, doing what needs to be done to ultimately close the deal. And it's a journey from start to finish. And if you don't manage your time in the process, you know, you're not going to have any left, and you're not going to be financially where you need to be because you worked harder, not smarter. There was a great little one line, and I really wish I could have remembered it. It's, you do not rise to the level of your intention, you fall to the level of your schedule. I mean, man, I tell you, there's not a better way to put it. You know, I'm not a big planner. My wife will tell you this is probably one of the biggest friction points in our lives, is that she is a very structured and a very planned individual. And I'm not. I'm more kind of shoot from the hip. But I will admit that you know, a certain minimum amount of planning is necessary to any and every endeavor. I had to learn that the hard way over many, many years, and I had some very patient bosses that really took time to explain the whys and the hows to me, and it made sense. It finally one day clicked after fighting it for quite some time. All right. So we've tied that back in, you know, if you're not, and again, it doesn't have to, you don't have to be heavy equipment, right? Whatever you're doing professionally, it's time management is going to be at the key of or at the center of your daily rituals. So here's a good way to do it. So day before, always set your schedule day before. I was a morning of, but I would get up early. Like I've always been a morning person. So I would get up 5:30 and I'd start going through Dodge reports. I would, again, I have my quadrant, so I know where I want to be. So it's a matter of me looking into my Dodge reports, looking into projects I've got in that quadrant, customers I need to see in that quadrant. And, after a while, after you've defined your cadence, your customers start to pick up on that. You'll have certain customers that, if you're in their quadrant on a Tuesday and they have something they want you to look at, they'll call you and be like, "Hey, can you come up Tuesday? I know you try to be in this area on Tuesdays. Can we set something up?" And that really, just kind of is compounding. It compounds like interest does. It's, you build that up, build that up, build that up. And ultimately one day you're sitting on a gold mine of a territory where your customers are trained. They know what the way you like to do business. You've adjusted to them. They've adjusted to you. It's just an ultimate great feeling situation, when you look back after a 5-year or whatever journey in a particular geography and say, man, I tell you what, coming in from day zero, I had zero, I knew nothing. I knew nobody, not what I was doing. And now here 5 years later, I've got a phone full of contacts. I've done millions and millions of dollars worth of business. It all starts with having a plan, executing your plan. And I will tell you this, if your plans are surface level, by one of my favorite words once I made it into management was, telling other greener or younger sales reps that if you're waking up in the morning and chasing, a 4-inch pump deal, then, I've won before I got out of bed because, I'm chasing projects that are years down the road. I know of a bypass that's going to go on in Bessemer at some point in the next decade. That's going to be one of the biggest, it bypasses in the history of the state of Alabama. But it's that kind of stuff is 10 years in the planning. It's part of a 25 year sewer master plan. So if you're still thinking transactionally on a deal to deal basis, maybe you're in the part of your career where you need to be, but if you're wanting to get to the next level, then I challenge you to take that strategic thinking to that next level before you get out of the territory, before you take that next step up the ladder. Challenge yourself to become more strategic, define everything within your territory, know everything within your territory, or book a business. Now, this isn't geographically limited. It can be based on a book. It can be based on a collection of customers, whatever that may be. Once you know how to strategically define overall goals, make your tools work for you, you will be more efficient, you will be more successful, and you will find that you have more time. All right, perfect. So that, I think, takes us through the business topic. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to hit. Okay, yeah, I did miss one good one. An excellent line is your calendar should reflect your commission goals. So prospecting is not on your calendar, then you're really not trying to grow a particular territory, right? Maybe you're farming, maybe you have a couple customers, maybe, there are non-growth territories out there, and there are non-growth reps out there that are great at what they do. They're just not hunters, and that's okay. I mean, not everybody can be a hunter. If follow-up's not on the calendar, closing is not the goal. Now, as a person who's come from the always be closing school of sales, I don't know that 100% agree with this, but I will say, you can be relationship, job, focused to where you're not trying to close the deal. I mean, I could be calling on a customer that I'm not trying to do any business with this calendar year, hell, maybe even next calendar year. But I may know that there's a wastewater treatment plant job that only this guy can do, or there's a project coming that this guy is going to get because he's the one that wants it bad enough to go out and cut his margins a little bit and take the project. So, plugging in and being part of an industry brings you, knowledge that no, territory rep right out of school is going to inherently have. There's no way they can, pick that up that quickly. There's no way to plug in unless, I'm training somebody and I'm plugging him into my network as I go. And, that's always a great situation, but, not many people throughout a career find themselves falling into a situation like that. So best know how to go out and build this thing and do it the right way rather than relying on, a lucky situation. All right. So getting into fatherhood here. And again, the whole theme of the episode is time management. And, it's kind of on this part where I find myself currently in life is, I don't have the time to just go pluck a few minutes here and there. I'm having to find efficiencies in my day to day that will free up time that I can give to that I can allocate other ways. And I really, outside of the business context of understanding how to allocate and how, or how, the process works, not necessarily how to do it myself, and going through the process and saying, okay, here's what time I have. Here's what I need to accomplish. Here's what I would like to accomplish. By the time you filter those down, there's just not a whole lot of time left. So what we've looked at, Anna and I, beyond, getting as much help as we can from anybody in our network capable of watching the kids for a few minutes while we clean the house or while we hell run out and have a drink together or dinner or something like that. It's finding little places like in the business world, like we talked about, if you master your territory, you do those strategy items, you segment your top 10s, you drop your bottom 20s. I mean, you will get to a point to where you're not having to put in the effort to maintain what you've got and to even grow. You maintain a velocity of a pipeline much more simply once you've built it the right way, have the right network exist in that, and that frees up time, on the personal side, on the fatherhood, on the marriage, on the, all of that. And, it can be so challenging once you let yourself fall behind that time curve to find those efficiencies. And that's kind of where Anna and I find ourselves right now. We've talked about on the show, working from 5:30 to in the morning to 10 at night. And, ultimately, yeah, the goal is do it now so we don't have to do it later in life. But, there's no given that it's going to last. There's no given that all of this, I could put in, thousands at this point, hours of my life to swing away golf club. And if it fails, then, I'm out thousands of hours, hundreds of thousands of dollars and, on to the next lesson in life. And I think, something that was pointed out to me was don't lose sight of everything else along the way. Yeah, you got a lot on the line. Yeah, you got a lot at risk, but, you got a lot there to be present for as well. And that's another, reason we decided to do this topic is kind of a top-down look of, hey, where can I find some time? I do want to do these things with my kids. I love taking Teddy to baseball. I love taking Frank outside and letting him do some water play. I love doing things with Leah, taking him to McWayne. But when you're working like this, you just don't have the time to do those things. And, it really puts pressure to be more intentional and more present for the time that you do have. I know I'm working really, really hard to spend less time on my phone. And I'll tell you, Anna walked in last night and I was sitting in a dark room, no phone, no sound, wasn't necessarily trying to go to sleep. But after the day, so many sounds, noises, lights, everything going on throughout the course of a day, I'm trying to come home and just kind of separate that for a little while, 10 minutes silence, not necessarily meditating, not necessarily doing anything, just kind of letting my body regulate, taking some deep breaths. I don't know if I had the light on or off. It definitely wasn't a bright room, but it wasn't intentionally sitting in darkness or anything like that. Just just wanted a few minutes of silence to kind of just, do you call it relax, shut down, turn off? I don't know, but you know, it it was almost immediate. Within 5 minutes, my kind of pulse, my stress, I could just kind of feel, my body kind of let go of a few things that it had been holding on to. And man, I tell you, that's something I'm going to be practicing on a lot here over the next few days, because it allows you, or at least it did me, to find that little place where I can separate it and let some of those troubles not go away, but just hang out for a little while I'm intentional with my family, with my kids, with my wife. And man, I tell you, I'm hoping that's going to be, really, really revolutionary to the way I kind of comport myself and the type of husband and father that I am, because it's so hard when you get wrapped up in the day to day to take that step back and take those breaths and it's the classic line, getting upset over spilled milk. But it's boy, I tell you what, when you're in the middle of it, dinner, you gotta get the kids fed, you gotta get them in bed because you gotta do this, and then you gotta go work some more, and a glass of milk spills. And yeah, damn it, I'm frustrated, but you're not frustrated at kid. You're not frustrated at your wife. You're just, it's just something else you're going to have to clean, something else you're going to have to do, some other obstacle in between you and your ultimate goal. And for very goal oriented people, when they see impediments to their goals, just stack and stack and stack it, the I don't know if I'd call it anxiety, but with me, it's almost like I said, like a rage, like a fury almost of, how dare this situation happen? And you're not mad at the kid again. I mean, and you're not mad at anyone in particular, except for the fact that it's happened. And that's, so being able to find that, peace, and being able to know where it is, know where it lives inside of you, and be able to channel it. Maybe not instantly. I hadn't got there yet. I hear some people can. I'm not there, but to have that in your back pocket, really, man, I tell you, it's. And I haven't been doing it long, not great at it, but I see the potential. I see the value to my life, so I'm really going to invest in seeing if that can help me be more present, more intentional, and just a better husband and father. All right, so rolling now into the golf topic, and I've heard this over the years, and I think even some of the pros do it on a much tighter scale, obviously, but pick one thing for a season to work on. Don't go out on a Friday and say, okay, I'm going to work on driving accuracy today, and then get mad if you don't hit 90%, greens and regulation the next day. So what I've done is specifically wedges, is say, okay, my practice is going to focus around wedges, because I need to learn how to throttle a swing. Like I couldn't, if I wasn't swinging out of my socks, I couldn't take a little bit off and still have the same consistent swing. And so for this year, that has been a focus here in Swing Away, and particularly with the wedges, because that's, the easiest way to learn those throttles. So what I'll do is, okay, I'll take 3 different clubs and try to hit it one distance. And there's reasons you would do this on the golf course. So if I say, okay, 75 yards, and I'm going to hit it with a 60 degree, I'm going to hit it with a 56 degree, and I'm going to hit it with a 52 degree. What I'm doing is I'm taking that distance at 3 different arcs, and I'm trying to carry it. So when I say that distance, I'm working on a carry distance. I'm not necessarily worried about where my ball goes or what happens after that 75 yards. I want a good, consistent arcing ball flight that drops at 75 yards. And you're seeing some of the challenges come out with the full swing, what they're doing with the kid on the range is basically the same thing, saying, okay, if you can hit these 3 numbers, you win a prize. So they'll say 100, and if you can hit 100 and then 150 and 200, then you win something. I think if you get on the number, you win something pretty nice. But they've scored it, and it really, I mean, it's a great challenge. Again, before I got into indoor, I didn't know to even look at carry distance. Never thought about it at all. If it was 150 yards, yep, 900. If it's, but if it was 140 carry, and that last 10 is just on the green to the pin, you had to carry less. I would have hit it in the lake and wondered why every time. Never would have figured it out. And, in 30 years of playing golf, I never figured it out that, hey, you don't know your carry distance. So that is why it has been so impactful to my game. That's why you see me, on some of these courses, going out and shooting around even par on a 6,500 yard course. Not that I couldn't do it, or not that I could go out and do it on green grass, because, those 10-foot gimmies, right? How many of those putts am I going to miss? I don't think I'm in any danger of breaking 80 at a world-class course in person anytime soon. But my golf game is leaps and bounds from where it was a year ago. And that's all thanks to the amount of time I spent practicing here at Swing Away Golf Club on the Full Swing Pro 2.0 simulators, on their driving range, using the range intentionally, learning my distances, learning my swing, learning how to throttle swings. And anybody can do it, right? I'm not a talented person, not even a, really good golfer. Just played a lot of golf here recently, and have gotten very analytical in the way I study my game. And so I would say that my advantage is that I know my game better than I did, and I can make better decisions on the golf course. Plus, I have a more consistent swing because I'm swinging every day, 5 days a week. Well, guys, that's going to do it here for the Clubhouse with Charley Bolak. Thank you so much for coming. Work on something this week for me. Pick one thing to work on your time, for your time management. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be through any of the topics, professionally, personally, golf. Pick one thing, improve it. Let me know how it goes. Thank you.